Well, hello everyone, welcome, and thanks for being here versus being in the ocean, because I'm one step away from it myself. But I'm really excited to moderate this panel today, because it's a really important discussion that I don't think gets enough attention in conferences like this, etc. So before we get started, I actually want each of our panelists to take 30 seconds and do a quick intro of their firms, so it sets the stage for our discussion today. So Brad, let's start with you.
Great, Suzanne. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to be here with all of you. My name is Brad Smithy. I'm the head of wealth management for Elevation Point. We launched last summer, so we're in our infancy, and we are an investor. We take minority stakes in the RIA world, so that's a little bit about us.
Wonderful. Cheryl?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cheryl Penny. I founded Dynasty Financial Partners about 17 years ago. We are an integrated platform company servicing RIAs, about 500 advisors, 60 RIAs around the country, a little over $110 billion now on the platform, providing integrated technology, investment platform capabilities, investment banking, and access to capital, as well as providing end leads of advisors and clients to those advisors as well.
Great, thanks for sharing that. So this session, Leading Through Change, Mastering the Human Side of Leadership. And to kick us off, let's talk about this. There are a lot of key attributes that most effective leaders possess. One of them is having a high EQ, which is emotional intelligence. But many still discount the importance of this and maybe even see it as a sign of weakness. So how do you balance leadership, authority, and accountability with empathy and understanding? So Cheryl, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. I think it's such an important topic. And half a step back, when you look at a lot of businesses that are, whether they're starting out or starting to rapidly grow, there's really four variables that we look at to try to determine the success of those businesses. The first, obviously, is the quality of the team. The second is the quality of the plan. The third is capital. Do you have the capital when you need it? And the fourth is timing, which can be timing in the market or timing in the entrepreneur's personal life. But the focus of this conversation, obviously, is on the first grouping, which is talent and leadership. And I think to be hugely successful or to win disproportionately in this space going forward, the big winners are going to be the ones that obviously have the aptitude, right? The competency, whether it's around wealth management or how to run your business, evolving from an advisor to CEO. But the second element is technology, given the cyborging that's happening of our industry, those that are on the forefront of tech. And the third around the cyborging is human empathy. Right, the best advisors take the things that can be commoditized with technology, they outsource it, and they free up their time to have the connections with their clients around the human empathy. And the way that plays out for us, because we fundamentally believe it's one of the biggest differentiators of how we build the business. We talk internally, Suzanne, about hiring for attitude over skills, or hiring for EQ over IQ. Not, attitude, no skills. Obviously, both are important, but there's a whole series of questions that we take people through to make sure that we're getting the right cultural alignment around the focus on EQ, because we think that's really going to differentiate us going forward.
Yeah, it's so important, and again, just not as appreciated as it should be. And I think the next generation of talent especially is going to be seeking this in the leaders of their firms if they want to join the firm and if they want to stay and feel that they're being appreciated. So I love that answer. Brad, how about you? How are you balancing accountability and authority with EQ? What advice do you have?
Well, thank you, Cheryl. I couldn't agree more. I guess a couple things. One thing is an aside. My daughter's a sophomore in college, and she's a business major, and they asked the students, this is recently, within the last couple of weeks, what's the number one characteristic you look for or you think is important for a successful leader? Empathy was the answer. These are 20-year-olds, and they already know that, which I thought was very interesting. Look, everybody knows you're the boss if you're the boss, whether you're running a business, whether you're running an organization, whether you're running a team. I used to have a mentor that would say, everybody knows you have a hammer in your drawer. You don't need to pull it out and wave it around. And a quick story where I failed miserably at that. I was a young financial advisor at Merrill Lynch, and because I was the lowest guy on the totem pole, they put me in charge of the training program because no one else would do it. So they had me do it. Well, I had one of those work party nights where you have, everybody picks up the phone. This is the old days, by the way, where you had a phone, you picked up and dialed. And
I remember those days.
You remember those days? I wouldn't say I fondly remember those days, but I remember them too. There was one particular young financial advisor who wasn't there, and these weren't voluntary events. And so I got my feelings hurt and decided I'm the boss and I'm going to show him. So he came in, and it looked like he had wadded his shirt up in a ball and put it on the ground and then folded it out and put it back on. So I went and I said, what's wrong with you? I maybe used some words I shouldn't have. And he had gotten a cancer diagnosis that day. I didn't find that out until I had pretty much done everything but be empathetic. And it was something that I learned from that point going forward. Never make assumptions, ask questions and let people respond before you assume anything.
Oh my God, what a powerful message. I know in my days leading investment news, I made one mistake similar where I assumed something and actually the information I got wasn't true and I wasn't empathetic. And I learned a hard lesson that day. And I think sometimes you have to make those mistakes before you realize how important the empathy card is to really being a successful leader. So thank you both for sharing that. So how about during times of transition or when things are challenging at your firms? Maybe you're not meeting your revenue goals or there's other issues going on. What strategies do you use to keep your teams engaged and motivated? So Cheryl, what are you doing at Dynasty?
Sure. I think, when it's times of change or things are challenging, we all just went through COVID, right, which was definitely a challenging time to lead. I think as leaders, oftentimes we want to react quick. And one of the things that I've learned is to slow down and really listen to your team and really understand where they're coming from. And then make decisions and over-communicate those decisions across the organization. I think the second thing is that's really important is transparency around how those decisions have been made. We spend a fair amount of time, whether it's monthly or quarterly reviews of the financials, of how our compensation plans at the firm work. We really don't want there to be any surprises. I think alignment is also a really important aspect that sometimes we miss as entrepreneurs as we grow the business. Alignment can mean a whole bunch of different things, but making sure that as many people in the firm who can have equity as possible. What I've found as the business continues to grow and has more success over time, the decision making gets tougher and tougher. There's a lot of truth to it being lonely at the top. And ultimately, you get to a point where most of the decisions that you have to make are the ones that are best for the company. And if everyone in the company has equity in the business, right, then you're making decisions that are best for everyone because of the alignment that people have around empathy. And then the last thing I would throw out is compromise, right? As leaders, our goal is really to set the vision, to set the macro goals for the business, and really then get out of the team's way, help them when they need it, but let the team figure out the best way to execute. You're there as a sounding board. And sometimes, we're tempted to micromanage things and micromanage the execution. I think if you're in a room and you're having a conversation, I do this a fair amount, I might disagree with one of the team members in terms of how they want to go about something. But whenever you're breaking new ground, no one really knows the right way to do it. So letting them make the decision to do it the way they want, walking out of that room with an alignment like it's your idea, can really empower and have somebody own the implementation on behalf of the business.
Yeah, that's great. Alignment, compromise, equity, all really, really key areas for leaders to think about. And I know it's so tempting to jump in and try and fix something, but sometimes, as we alluded to earlier, it's better to kind of learn from mistakes, and that also shows your team that you trust them. So Brad, what about you? What strategies do you use when times are tough to keep your firm engaged and motivated?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that for us and for where I've been in the past, I mean, you always want to have fun. You always want to try to bring people together. You always want to recognize accomplishments. You want to make sure people feel valued. But there's one little tactic that I was taught one time, and it sounds silly, but it really worked, especially like during COVID and, firms I've been at have undergone significant change, things like that, was someone told me once, leadership occurs in conversations, right? Leadership's a one-on-one exercise. And during COVID, we tended to get overscheduled. How many of you would wake up on a Monday morning and look at your calendar because you were sitting in one spot, so it was easy to get to you? And you had 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 meetings that day, and they were back to back to back to back. It was grueling, and it was disheartening. What a leader I worked with, who I have a ton of respect for, taught me was, just pick up the phone and call. Let's have organic conversations again. I've got a friend who wants to schedule conversations, and I won't do it anymore. I mean, call me, and if I miss you, I'll call you back. But those one-on-one conversations where you're able to empathize with someone's situation, where you're able to figure out exactly where their head's at, where you're able to give them words of encouragement, versus something that's a little bit more, I don't know what the right word's, corporate,
Yeah.
I think carries a lot of weight and can mean a lot to people.
Yeah, I think all of those things are so important, and just like really understanding where people are coming from, and the tone sometimes that an email you may misinterpret. So if you are speaking on the phone, it becomes a much easier conversation sometimes to have. I think that's great advice.
Suzanne, can I just add one thing to that? I think sometimes we forget this as leaders too. When we're walking around our office, everyone's watching us. And I say this to a lot of my executive team. We all go through really stressful times, and if you're stressed out, they may not say it, but it scares the hell out of the company, right? And some of the best leaders and mentors that I've been able to work with over the years, they're very even keel, and you wouldn't know if the business is going straight up or straight down, given how they carry themselves. And I find that to be very important as well.
Yeah, what a great point. It's like they're always watching, and you sometimes have to play the role of someone that is calm weathering during a storm. Before we get to our next question, I do want to remind you all that you can submit questions through the QR code, and I'll get to any questions. Or if that's too challenging, if you don't feel like doing it, just raise your hand towards the end, and I'll try and get some questions as well. So speaking of difficult conversations, how do you approach difficult conversations with your team when change is met with resistance? So we all have had to, at some point, institute something that is not popular, right? So how do you address that and mitigate any risk that goes along with these difficult conversations? Brad?
I think you have to hit it head on. In my experience, we used to say you got to let the steam off the tea kettle. If someone is boiling over, so to speak, you kind of have to let them. Let them maybe wear themselves out if that's the way it goes. But I've always found that having a direct conversation, allowing people to speak, and just addressing it head on to a point is the best way to handle it. And the other thing is you've got to be willing to accept feedback. And I found myself in situations where they say everybody wants feedback until you give it to them. Or everyone gets candor until you give it to them. To tell someone to give you feedback and not accept it, well, that's on you. And so we've always found that those kind of conversations, as unpleasant as they are, if you've had that candor around that conversation, you're both honest, you're respectful, you're going to leave there probably in a much stronger place. Some of the best relationships I've had at work have been people that I've really gone round and round with at some point, because you kind of get it all out there. So, long-winded answer to your question is, I think if you have to hit those conversations head on. You got to let people vent. You got to let them let the steam off the kettle.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That whole being direct. And I think your teams really respect that and appreciate that. And direct can also be empathetic. So, great points. Cheryl, how about you? How do you handle difficult conversations when you've had to maybe roll out something not super popular?
Well, I think the direct point is an important one, but hopefully, whatever the tough conversation that you're having isn't a surprise to the individual, especially if it's a performance-related, conversation, or someone's getting moved, to a different area, demoted, or moved out of the business. It's really not good to surprise people in that scenario. It should be a series of conversations that ultimately get to a point where the person knows, what the conversation is that's coming. We also try to time difficult conversations in a way where people can focus. And an example of that would be, for years and years, we would give our annual performance review at the same time that we would give people their bonus numbers. And what I realized is no one was paying attention to the review. They just wanted me to shut the heck up and hurry up and get to the bonus number, right? So we separated the two. We have performance reviews that are done separate from a bonus conversation so that we can have more thoughtful and meaningful engagement around the performance piece. One of our core management principles, and it's something I learned from a mentor years ago, our internal philosophy when it comes to managing people is to be cold on numbers, but warm on people. So cold on numbers, but warm on people means ultimately you have to hit your numbers, and it has to be clear, and everyone needs to understand what they are. And when people don't, you hold them accountable, but you do it in a way that's respectful, that comes from a place of empathy. You let them control the message oftentimes with how they're leaving the firm, because sometimes you have really good people in the wrong roles, or the people who help you get you here aren't necessarily the ones going to help you get you there, but treating them with dignity and respect and helping them find an opportunity somewhere else is super important. And the flip side is, if you don't do that, nothing will kill the culture of the stars in the organization. That over time will have to take on a disproportionate amount of the work if you're not focusing on upgrading the talent over time.
What great points. And I think you mentioned something that's important. It underscores how important it is to do consistent performance reviews, right? Because again, you don't want to take people by surprise. It's your obligation as a leader to provide that feedback if they're not meeting expectations or what have you. Sometimes people don't like to do them because they're difficult. But if you really want to address that kind of thing head on, I think that's so important, is just really making sure that you're having consistent feedback with those official performance reviews. Can you share, so Cheryl, let's start with you. Can you share an example where you have led with empathy and how it helped turn maybe a challenging situation into a positive opportunity? Like, were you dreading something and then it actually worked out great because you handled it in a way where you were dealing with emotional intelligence?
Yeah, well, we had a situation that unfortunately sounds similar to the story that Brad was sharing earlier. One of our early stage team members, one of the founders, day one of Dynasty, her name was Amanda Curley, got sick a couple years ago with breast cancer. And we have a unlimited vacation, unlimited leave policy, and we want to meet people where they are and really be supportive of each other. So unfortunately, after about a 2-year battle, we lost Amanda. And the company really rallied together. We fully funded, she had 2 daughters, 10 and 8, fully funded the kids' college education, which is something we're really proud of. A number of our clients also pitched in to do it. But along the way, there was just so much camaraderie and the company pulling together and people taking afternoons off, to go and spend time with Amanda and do things with her that were important for her to do. You roll the clock forward. Recently, we had over in St. Pete, Tampa, St. Pete, where the business is located. Unfortunately, we had a couple hurricanes, and a lot of the community was totally destroyed. and a number, myself included, but a number of the team members lost their homes. And I saw something incredible, and I think it's in large part because of how the business had pulled together around Amanda, where so many of the team members moved in with other team members and supported each other, and went above and beyond to find friends who were contractors to help people. It just was really, really special and something I'm super proud of, and I think it's in part because of the empathetic leadership across the organization that we have at Dynasty.
Well, first of all, I'm very sorry about your team member. Second, what powerful examples based on tragedy, turning real challenging situations into an opportunity. But the fact that you have unlimited vacation and things like that, that is an indicator of being having an empathetic leader at the helm by having those types of policies in place, quite frankly. And that really goes a long way, not only with your current team members, but attracting the next generation, 100%. So great, great examples. Brad, how about you? How have you been able to use empathy to turn a challenging situation into an opportunity?
Well, I will admit right off the bat that my stories aren't nearly as impactful as Cheryl's here.
Don't discount yourself.
Both of those. This isn't a life or death example, but it was an important one for me, at least, and for the person I'm about to mention to you. So I had a manager who ran a particular branch, and this guy was universally loved, but he wasn't very effective. Tough guy, former Marine. Well, he'd tell you never a former Marine. He's a Marine, and I love the guy, but he just was not getting it done. And I struggled for a couple of years to try to motivate him in the best way I could, or to try to help him, or try to prop him up where I could, and put people around him to prop him up, because he was well respected, is well respected and well liked. Well, I got a new boss who called me up one day, and he said to me, I'm tired of you talking about him. If you don't make a change, I will put someone in who will. So I was on the clock. And so I drove to the office, parked in the parking lot, called the manager, and I said, hey, I need to meet with you. And he said, great, what time? I said, I'll be up there in 30 seconds, which was probably not the best approach. I had him on the ropes, but I got up there and I looked at him, and I really liked this guy, and I just said, look, it's really, really time for a change, and I hope you'll be supportive, outwardly to the rest of the office, and get behind this new chapter for you. The first thing out of his mouth was, I'm so glad you're doing this. What took you so long? And that might have been an example when empathy was a mistake, or at least it certainly slowed things down. He just had so much pride he couldn't pull the trigger on his own, coming out of the role. And what ended up happening is he went on to focus solely on his financial advisory practice. He grew significantly. We hired a manager in there who was beloved. The whole office rallied around the manager who was taken out of his role. We treated it as a retirement from that particular role. And the environment and esprit de corps of that office turned around completely. And I was too blind to see it. So that was, I guess, an example where maybe empathy cost me, but ultimately it helped because that situation really turned around nicely.
Nothing will help enhance your culture better than firing an asshole. Right? It is what it is. So I couldn't agree more with what you were saying there.
Yeah, again, just like great examples. And I think, by the way that you did approach it with him was empathetic. And I think we've all been there and had like a situation like that where you're on the clock and it's really uncomfortable. So I think you probably handled it the best way that you could. In a similar, I would say adjacent question to how you just answered that, what if you have a really effective team member who's ready for that next leadership role and they're letting you know, but they really lack that EQ factor? and you know this because other team members have shared this with you. How do you address it with them? And are there any training programs or communication methods that have proven effective to really, this is going to be a great leader, but they really need to hone in on that EQ. Cheryl, have you had to deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually, in our annual reviews, we equally weight reviewing team members based on EQ and IQ, right? So we're looking at qualitative and quantitative factors and ranking the team in that way. We're also big believers in mentorship and mentorship by committee. So we try to get mentors, whether it's inside of the company or outside of the company. For senior executives, sometimes we'll hire an outside coach or someone to help evolve those skills. I mean, some people are just naturally wired that way and exceptionally talented from an EQ standpoint. But I do think some of the skills can be learned if you put together a dedicated professional development program around it. By the way, most people I've found they don't like to be trained. Don't use the word training, but if you say we're going to offer professional development, they sign up for it a lot more than training. But we do have professional development programs around building out the softer side of management.
Yeah, and I think going back to the importance of performance reviews or giving active and intentional feedback, you can address that throughout that person's career. That, hey, I'd like you to work. You're great at this, this, and this. I'd like you to work on this area, and we have some programs that we think will be helpful. So I love that. Brad, how about you?
I love what Cheryl said. I think training sounds like corrective action, and developmental program sounds like an investment in people. The way we would do it is very similar to what Cheryl said. I mean, first of all, you have to acknowledge it, right? You have to have a conversation that's where you say, look, these are some things we want you to work on. We think it'll make you better. It'll make you more effective. You'll have a better existence here, whatever the case might be. But then you put them with someone who might be completely opposite and say, you know what, we want you to help them, and they want them to help you. And hopefully it rubs off. And if it does not, then you got to determine what the next course of action is, or is the next role the right role for them? Maybe there's something else.
But it is, I think, a really critical piece of being a leader, and it can cost somebody that next step and next phase in their career. So I think it's just really important to have those open and direct conversations. In our last couple minutes, I really would love to ask you both to provide 2 tangible and effective ideas that would drive employee engagement. Again, this is another really, really key piece to having a successful firm, is to keep your team members happy and productive. So, Brad, why don't we start with you? What are some ideas that will really drive employee engagement that you've seen be successful?
I think it starts with recognition, and that doesn't necessarily mean formal recognition. It's job well done. It's there are a lot of people thrive on that little nugget of positivity that gets them to come back to work the next day with a smile on their face versus dreading the next 10-hour day that they have to make. So I think finding any sort of way you can to recognize employees. You don't want to make it artificial so it doesn't mean anything, but anytime you can find a way to recognize an employee, maybe I need to stop using the word employee, recognize a teammate, I think that's something that's important. And the other thing is, I always felt like getting the family involved was an important way to really make people feel a part of something bigger than themselves. And some people say they separate work and personal time. I don't think most of us do. And so that doesn't mean it's a good thing, but the more you can involve the family, the children, whatever the case might be, I think that helps you with employee engagement.
Yeah, great ideas. Cheryl, how about you?
I agree. Some of our best events have been where we have significant others that are there. I've certainly never made a major hiring decision in my career without involving my wife. Her understanding and empathy and her EQ is much higher than mine, so I'd be crazy not to use that resource. The tangible idea, I would suggest, if anyone doesn't do this, you should add it, is to do an annual culture survey. And you can just use software like SurveyMonkey. There's a lot of them that are out there. But write down 2020, work with your team to say what are the questions that you want to really have an honest conversation around with your team. I find it to be really important that it's truly anonymous. And we go through, I make it clear, if someone tries to cheat and make it not anonymous, we tell them they're fired. Right? We take it that serious. We want people really to be confident that it is. And so we've been doing it now for 10 years, and we literally then track the questions over 10 years. Right? So you have this great data to see how the organization is doing in a lot of key metrics. And then as a leader, you sit down and you review it in a very candid way in a conversation with the team. And in this last survey, one of the things that our team asked for is for us to develop what we call a culture coin. And we gave them to some of the top culture carriers in the firm. And they go out twice a month, just take the team out for drinks. One time a month, they can take their team members out. And the other time, they have to take people out who are not in their department at all. And they come up with different topics. The executive team doesn't go out and do it. It's across the organization. And then they'll give us a summary of any key topics that come out of those conversations. But it's driven incredible team engagement. And it was such a simple thing that came out of the culture survey that we did, the most recent one a few months ago.
What a great way to end this discussion. That was the great advice. I love the culture survey. It's so helpful to every type of business. So with that, thank you all for your time and attention. You guys, thank you. Let's give a hand to our panelists for some really, really important EQ advice. Thanks, everyone.